everyone. I am Claire Liguori. I'm a senior principal engineer in the AWS Next Gen Developer Experience org. And what that means is that I focus on how generative AI can transform the builder experience on AWS. So that's why I'm so excited to introduce you today to Amazon Q, your new assistant and expert guide for building on AWS. So today I'm going to give you an overview of Amazon Q. I'll tell you about a few of the capabilities of Q. I'll demo some of those capabilities as a day in the life of a developer using Q. And then I'll talk a little bit about how to get started with Q. So I'm really excited to dive deep with you on Q today, which is available in preview. So Q is a new type of generative AI-powered assistant designed specifically for work. So Q can be tailored to your business to have conversations, take actions, generate content, and all of that can be connected to your data and your expertise, which might be found in your internal knowledge bases, it might be found in your code bases or your other enterprise systems internally. And when you're chatting with Q, you can use it to streamline some of the tasks you do in your everyday work, or you can even use it to spark creativity and innovation in your work. Q has multiple areas of expertise to cover the different users and different roles within your company and the work that they do. First, Q is an expert in your business. You can connect Q to your company's information repositories and enterprise systems. Q is also an expert in building on AWS. It's been trained on 17 years worth of AWS information and knowledge to transform the way that you build, operate, and maintain applications and workloads on AWS. Amazon Q in Amazon QuickSight, which is our business intelligence service, allows your employees to ask questions of their dashboards and to quickly create new dashboards by simply describing the data that they want to see visualized in natural language. Amazon Q in Amazon Connect, our contact center service, helps your customer service agents to provide better customer service by automatically providing those service agents with suggested actions, suggested responses, and even relevant links to articles. And coming soon, Amazon Q in AWS Supply Chain will help supply and demand managers, inventory managers, and trading partners have conversations to get deeper insights about things like stock out and overstock risks and get suggested actions for avoiding those risks. So with so many different expertises in Q, with so many different aspects for how you do your work, Q is truly your AWS, your AI assistant for all of the work that you do and for your entire business. But today in this session, I'm going to focus on building on AWS. That's my passion. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Q's capabilities for building on AWS. But first, I want to start by talking about the challenges that we as developers face getting our job done today, doing our work. So software.com analyzed data from more than 250 engineers in their IDEs worldwide over a 3-month period. And they found that the median time that developers actually spend editing and writing code in their IDE was less than an hour a day. This is mind-blowing to me, but when I think about it, maybe it's true. Per work week, we spend less than 4.5 hours writing code per week, and only 10% of developers spend more than 2 hours per day writing code in their IDE. So this is totally mind-blowing, right? So this begs the question, why are we not able to spend more time doing the thing that I love to do, building and writing code in my IDE? What are the challenges that we're facing here? So I like to think of development tasks, the work that we do every day as developers, as 5 different phases: research, design, develop, test, and maintain. So if we've seen, coding is actually a small part of our work as developers. Coding in the IDE is less than an hour a day. So while I love to be building and innovating in the IDE, There are, of course, so many other aspects to development tasks that kind of take me away from the work that I want to be doing in my IDE. So first, when I pick up a development task, I need to do a bit of research. I need to understand what information I need and go and find that information. And I personally find this to be the most frustrating and time-consuming part of a development task. I need to find accurate and up-to-date information about the tasks that I'm going to do, about my code base. I need to find information about what AWS services I could use, how I could connect them together, what solutions are out there. And so if you're anything like me, you spend a lot of time looking through AWS documentation, looking through blog posts, searching on Google, getting on Stack Overflow, all before I get into my code base in my IDE. I have to spend all of this time doing this. And as part of researching, you might also be researching what's the future for your application. What other powerful features could you add to your application? What re-architectures and refactoring or optimizations could you be doing? And turning those into the next development tasks you might pick up. So when I move into the design phase, I need to plan out my approach to a task. What are the code bases that are going to change? What are the changes that I need to make? For that, I need to deeply understand my code base. I need to deeply understand my application architecture to understand what changes do I need to make. So I might need to ramp up on a code base when I pick up a development task that I'm not very familiar with. And I might also need to pick up a new programming language that might be new to me. When I started working on Q, of course, Python is the language of choice for AI and ML, but I'd not written any production Python code before. And so this was a hard ramp up for me to start writing a bunch of code in Python that was going to go to production. And so I very much felt that this year as I was ramping up on a totally new code base with Q and a totally new language as well. So finally, we've done research, we've done design, we're ready to code. Finally, we get into our IDE and are able to complete some coding tasks. But after we've completed those coding tasks, we might need to write tests, we might need to run tests, we might need to troubleshoot bugs. And I'm sure we've all experienced the frustration of spending hours and hours troubleshooting bugs, trying to figure out what the problem is, why our tests aren't passing. And of course, all code bases require ongoing maintenance. This could involve upgrading dependencies, it could involve patching, upgrading programming languages, and of course, most days I spend a bit of time doing code reviews for the other members of my team when they've completed their development tasks. So with all this, it's no wonder that we're spending less than an hour a day in the IDE. But I believe that a huge shift is coming in the way that we developers do our work day to day. And I believe that that huge shift is Amazon Q. I believe that Q will transform the daily developer experience across research, design, develop, test, and maintain. Q will become part of all the phases of development tasks and be with us throughout the day as we're doing our development work. I think it will transform the way that developers onboard to teams and ramp them up and become productive faster with Q. And I believe that it will transform how quickly we can build more powerful applications with Q. So from how we find information to how we write code and generate code to figuring out bugs and all the way to doing our code reviews. Q will even brainstorm with us. What are those next additions to our applications? How can we make our applications more powerful and even optimize application performance and spend? So Q's expertise in AWS makes it your generative AI-powered assistant that gives you expert guidance on building, maintaining, and operating applications on AWS. You can ask questions about AWS to Q, and it will give you quick, accurate responses. And you can even complete complex development tasks faster with Q's guidance and its ability to generate code. And with Q, you can learn, you can explore, you can learn how to get started, you can explore how to build secure and scalable applications, and you can optimize your application performance and spend. Q is powered by generative AI, and it's been trained on 17 years worth of AWS information and knowledge. So it's trained on AWS documentation, blog posts, SDKs, APIs, as well as open source data and code. So let's dig into a few of the capabilities of Q for developers. So Q helps you learn, explore, and take action. You can ask questions about AWS services and features. You can even get guidance on architectural best practices for your applications on AWS. Q will even help you select the optimal EC2 instance type out of over 600 possible instance types today. You can use Q to troubleshoot errors that you might see in the console, and you can use it to troubleshoot issues connecting to EC2 instances and other network issues. You can even use it to connect to AWS support to get deeper guidance. Q also helps you with your development tasks. You can ask it questions about your code and about AWS. You can use it to refactor, optimize, and fix your code. And you can even use it to write your tests for you. Q can plan and write complex features for you. This is a feature we call feature development, which I really believe is pushing the boundaries of what generative AI can do for us as developers, taking on entire tasks from our backlog for us. Q can also help you with how much time you spend code reviewing. It can summarize pull requests and code review feedback so you get up to speed on a pull request much faster. And it can upgrade programming languages for you. So because Q is transforming the way you do your work, it's of course available where you do your work today. You might start your day with Q in the console or on the documentation website. You might move to using Q in your IDE or when chatting with your team members in Slack. And you might finish up your day doing code reviews with Q in Code Catalyst. So Q is available on the AWS website, Management Console, the documentation website, and the mobile app. And it's available in your IDEs. It's today available in VS Code and JetBrains. And that's all through Code Whisper within your IDE as well. It's available in Code Catalyst, and it's available in Microsoft Teams and Slack through AWS Chatbot. So I want to spotlight a couple of these, Code Whisper and Code Catalyst. Code Whisper is an AI-powered productivity tool for the IDE and for the command line. So Code Whisper is a tool that I use every day in my IDE, and it generates code recommendations for you in the IDE as you're typing. So for example, you can write a comment in your code. You can say, this Lambda function parses an event, and it sends a security alert if the event meets these conditions. And Code Whisper will auto-complete, using generative AI, the entire function for you. Code Whisper supports 15 different programming languages, and this week we announced we also added support for infrastructure as code, including CloudFormation and CDK. And with Q and Code Whisper together now in the IDE, you can now complete these complex development tasks even faster. So you can interact with Q to ask questions in the IDE about the code, about the best way to do things with AWS. You can plan out complex features with Q. And then once you're ready to jump into editing your code, Code Whisper is helping you complete those tasks faster with those inline code recommendations. Code Catalyst is a unified software development service that supports you across planning, development, and delivery of your software projects on AWS. You can create new projects in Code Catalyst within minutes with Code Catalyst blueprints, and you can collaborate with your team members through things like issues and pull requests. You can open up your projects in personal development environments in the cloud, and you can deploy those software projects using CI/CD pipelines. So Q shows up in Code Catalyst almost as a user, as another member on your team. Q can summarize changes in a pull request and summarize the feedback that that pull request has already received for you. You can even assign issues to Q. This is our feature that we call feature development. So Q will take the description of a new feature. Let's say I want to add an API to an existing service, and you can assign that issue to Q, almost like assigning a development task in your backlog to another member of your team. And Q will go off and generate a plan, an approach to that, and then it will generate a pull request for you. And so at that point, you're truly sort of interacting with another member of your team. You can leave feedback, comments, and it will go off and generate a new revision for you. So now that we've seen some of the capabilities of Q, let's see them put into action. Let's walk through a day in the life of a developer using Q and see how Q transforms the daily life of developers. So let's say I am brand new to a software development team, and I'm working on this new generative AI-powered application that my team is working on launching. So it's not quite finished yet. This application is a tool that gives me information about documents that I upload to the tool. So it will first use generative AI to summarize the contents of the document, and then it will generate a visual word cloud of that document's contents as well. The architecture for this application is multi-tier. It includes a front-end application, 2 back-end APIs. The back-end APIs include first the content summary generator. So this is a Lambda function that leverages Amazon Bedrock to summarize the document using generative AI. And second is the word cloud generator Lambda function. So I have a mix of programming languages going on here, which you'll see in the demo. My front-end application is written in Python, the content summary generator is written in TypeScript, and the word cloud generator is written in Java. So I'm pretty excited about joining this new team and working on this new application and helping this team launch this application. So let's take a look at the development tasks that my team has assigned to me to help get the application towards launch. So I've picked up 4 development tasks to get this application ready for launch. And normally this would take me weeks, if not months, to complete. And with Q's help, we're going to do it in a few minutes. So let's work on this first task, upload word cloud images to S3. What could that mean? So currently the word cloud API, we're seeing a sample response here. It returns the raw image data for that generated word cloud image directly in the API's response. And you can see the sample here. My team lead has decided it would be better to upload the generated image to S3 first, and then just return a link in the API's response. So let's go make that change. Remember that I am very, very new to this team, and let's also say I'm very new to AWS. I'm not even sure what S3 is. So I go into Q in the console to get answers to my questions. You can find Q in the right-hand panel, and that will pop up Q where I can ask questions about AWS. And this is pretty embarrassing, but I first need to ask, what is S3? And Q is going to give me a clear, accurate answer about S3. So here, Q is telling me all about S3. It's giving me an intro to it. And then it even gives me links to some further documentation so I can go and explore and learn more about what S3 is. But I can also ask a question that's a little bit more directly related to my development task. I'm asking, how do I upload a file? So Q has the context as part of this conversation to realize I mean upload a file to S3. And so it's giving me a sample AWS CLI command for how to upload a file to S3. But I know that my application uses Java. It's not going to use the AWS CLI. And so I ask a question that's very specific to my team. How do I upload a file in Java? So the answer here that comes back from Q is going to tell me how to use the AWS SDK for Java to upload the file. And it even gives me a code sample that I can use, copy and paste, and go into my IDE and get started. And so again, so I can learn, it again gives me some relevant links, including to the AWS SDK. So now that I've learned a little bit more about S3, I'm ready to get into my IDE and start coding. I open up my code base here in the IDE, and I'm looking at one of the classes for the word cloud generator function. But I'm not very familiar with this code. I'm very new to this team. So Q can help me to ramp up on this code base really quickly. I'm going to open up this new Q panel in my IDE. And I can start asking questions like, what does this application do? Very general questions about my code base. And by looking at the code that I have open in my IDE, Q can give me an accurate summary of the application. So here it's telling me that the application is generating a word cloud image. I can also ask questions about AWS and about code to Q in the IDE. So I can ask it, for example, how do I return a link to an object in S3? I already asked it, how do I upload a file? But the other side of that is I need to generate a link to it. So here Q is explaining S3 pre-signed URLs to me as the recommended way for returning a link to the API caller to that new object in S3 that has the word cloud image. And it tells me a few of the basic steps, but I would love some sample code from Q. So I'm going to ask it, how do I do that in Java? How do I create a pre-signed URL in Java? So here it's going to give me some explanation about how to use, again, the AWS SDK for Java to complete this task, but it's also going to give me some direct code samples. And what's great about Q in the IDE is that I have these inserted cursor and copy buttons down below. So it's really easy for me to start incorporating this code into my code base right in the IDE. I realize now, though, that I first need to create an S3 bucket to actually upload these images to. So I'm going to go over to my infrastructure as code using AWS CDK, and I'll find my word cloud function defined in CDK. So this is the function I need to create an S3 bucket for. So I can ask Q for help in creating that S3 bucket in CDK. I'm not sure what the exact classes are in Python for AWS CDK, so I'm going to use Q's help to figure out what's exactly the right syntax and methods. So I ask it, how do I create an S3 bucket for the word cloud generator using CDK? And what's neat here is that I didn't actually have to tell it what CDK language I was using. So usually we would probably see examples in TypeScript, but here it saw that I had opened up this file in Python, and it's giving me these examples directly in Python. So I'm going to go ahead and it's also giving me some links where I can dig into some more information. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this definition over into my code and edit it a little bit. So I'm going to remove the static bucket name here and let CloudFormation generate that for me. So now that I have the bucket, I'm also going to ask Q, how do I add permissions for that Lambda function to actually read and write to the bucket? What's my next step that I need to add to this CDK file? So here it's again giving me examples in Python, and because it's using generative AI for these samples, it's actually using the exact right variable names that I needed. So it looked at the file that I had open, and it used word cloud Lambda function and word cloud bucket that were already existing in my file. So I inserted that at my cursor, and now I have that. But I also need to provide the name of the bucket to the Lambda function, so it knows which bucket to upload that word cloud image to. I'm not really sure what the parameter name is in Lambda functions in CDK for environment variables. So I'm right-clicking on the code and sending the code snippet to the Q prompt. And then I can ask it questions specifically about this snippet of code from my file. So I'm going to ask it, what is the parameter to add an environment variable? The really, really neat thing here is that Q actually figured out what I was trying to do here. Based on our previous conversation, based on the previous code I had inserted into my file, it realized I was probably trying to provide the bucket name as an environment variable to the Lambda function. So I'm able to add that right away, and now I have my S3 bucket. We've got the right permissions. We've got the right name going into the Lambda function. So now that I have that, I'm actually going to let Q do the rest of this development task of moving over to uploading to S3 and returning a link to the caller. I'm going to use a new capability that we call feature development. So I'm going to hop into a new Q chat. And to let Q develop this feature for me, I'm going to use a new command called /dev. In /dev, I can describe the feature that I'm trying to build. So I can describe the fact that I need to change the logic of my application to upload the word cloud image to S3, and instead of returning the raw image data, to return a pre-signed URL from S3. So the feature development capability looks at your entire code base and tries to figure out what are all of the different changes that I need to make. And it first comes up with a plan. So a plan describes at a high level all the changes that Q thinks it needs to make in my code base to complete this feature. So I find this plan to be so helpful, even as just a first step in my own development tasks, because it's really helping me to sort of navigate what are all the changes here that I need to make. So you can use this planning standalone when you're using /dev, and you can use it to sort of help you to tackle a task and then jump into coding yourself. But the next step is letting Q do the coding for us. This is not actually available yet. It's coming soon, but I wanted to give you a little sneak peek of what happens. So here in the plan, it's called out all the different classes that it needs to update, all the different files it needs to update. And when I click write code, it's going to go off and generate that code and then come back with a diff for me. So I can inspect each file to see what I think of the changes. So Q has added the code for the S3 client within the generator class. It uses that client to upload the image to the bucket defined by the bucket name environment variable. And it's also updating the API model to return the URL as well. So here it's changed my API model to add a different field. And here it's also attempted to update the unit tests. So this is one of the really great parts of this sort of holistic feature development capability is that it also writes those tests for you based on what code it wrote. But I now have the opportunity to give Q some feedback about the code, to tell it what tweaks or different approaches I want to take and get the code generated again. So this is very similar to maybe how you would interact with a team member on your team as they're kind of going through their first development task, where you kind of walk them through what are the changes that you want them to make, what are the best approaches. So Q asked me, how can the code be improved? So I'm going to tell it the tweaks that I want it to make. For example, instead of having the unit test actually upload an image to S3 and then actually download it from S3, I actually want it to mock the client. It did that correctly in the failure case, but it didn't do that exactly correctly in the success case. And this is where we're sort of becoming prompt engineers, generative AI prompt engineers, where it's really important to be very clear with Q or any other AI about what it is we actually want and being very clear with our instructions. And so I found that I've gotten a little bit better over time at giving feedback to Q to get the successful code that I want. One of the other things it missed is it missed import statements for the S3 client, so this wouldn't actually build. So I'm going to go ahead and remind it about that. And it also missed updating my Maven configuration file to actually add the S3 client, add the AWS SDK as a new dependency. So now we'll see what updates Q makes to the code based on my feedback. So here it comes back with a new div based on the new set of changes that it's made. So I can also go ahead and inspect them. And here it successfully added those missing imports that it missed the first time. It still has all the changes from the previous go-round. It still has the changes to the API model, adding that URL field. But it didn't quite get what I was asking it for in the unit test, so it didn't quite get the mocking correct. So this is an example where I could probably be a little bit clearer in my instructions, or even give fewer instructions so that it can kind of focus on doing one change at a time. And again, this is really kind of pushing the boundaries of what generative AI can do for us as developers. So we're pretty excited to get this in the hands of folks and see what you think. At this point, I can either keep iterating, I can keep giving Q some more feedback and get more diffs, or I could go ahead and sort of take the code that's kind of 80% there and apply it in my local IDE and start editing from there. So I find that even when Q doesn't get it 100% in feature development, it's still really useful for me for productivity-wise because it often takes care of a lot of boilerplate code for me, and I can just focus on tweaking the important parts. So now that I've used Q to help me make the code changes for this task, we can now see that the API response is now correctly returning a pre-signed S3 URL for the word cloud image instead of the raw image data. So I can go ahead and mark my very first task on this team as complete, and we can move on to the next one, upgrading the word cloud API codebase to Java 17. So the codebase currently uses Java 8, and we need to upgrade it to Java 17 to keep up to date and keep it secure. So I'm not exactly sure what changes I need to make to upgrade to Java 17. I have a few hints in my IDE where I'm using some internal JDK classes that it's giving me warnings about. But I'm sure that there are more changes that I need to make. So I'm going to go into the AWS panel in the IDE and click Transform to easily upgrade this project using Q. The first thing Q does is upload my local code into a dedicated environment and make sure that it builds successfully in Java 8. And then it's going to generate a plan for transforming my code to be able to compile with Java 17. So now Q has generated that transformation plan after successfully building my code in Java 8 And now it's working on transforming my code. So first, Q will update any dependencies that I have or code that's not compatible with Java 17. And then Q will build the code in Java 17 and start to fix some of the errors. So this is very similar to what we would do as developers when trying to upgrade to Java 17. We would see what compiler errors come out and try to fix those compiler errors and then move on to the next step. So Q is doing that process iteratively for you using generative AI. So it's a huge time saver. And then it's finally going to finalize the code changes and then give those back to me in the IDE. So now our transformation is complete, and Q was able to transform the code. And Q changed both, we can take a look at the differences here. So it changed both my pom.xml here, my Maven configuration. It changed the target from JDK 8 to 17. And then it also updated one of my dependencies, Lombok, to be compatible with Java 17. It also changed replaced that use of internal JDK classes that don't exist in Java 17 anymore. And then a few different code changes that were also required to build in Java 17. So then I can go and accept those changes and apply them locally. And now I can start compiling on Java 17. So now we can mark my second task as complete after using Q to transform my code. Let's move on to my third task, displaying the word cloud images in the UI. So for this class, I need to hook up the front-end application to the word cloud API I was previously working on. And I'm going to, again, let Q complete most of this task for me using the Q feature development capability. But this time, I'm going to interact with Q in CodeCatalyst instead of in my IDE. So instead of through chat, I interact with Q through CodeCatalyst through issues and pull requests. Here I have created an issue describing the changes I want to make. And I'm going to assign it to Amazon Q to kick off feature development with Q. I first confirm the source code repository that Q should make changes in, and Q kicks off. So Q is first going to read the repository that I selected, and then it generates a background. This is kind of interesting because it's describing Q's own understanding of the code base. It's able to tell me what the application does and what technologies it uses, like Docker. And then it generates the development plan, or the approach. So similar to what we saw in the IDE, Q describes the approach it will take and what files it will change. And I can give Q feedback on its approach by directly replying to Q in the issue. And Q will generate a new plan. So here I have the revised approach, and I'm going to give it one more round of feedback before I'm happy with the approach. And as we saw in the IDE, this is where it's really important where we become prompt engineers, and it's important to give clear feedback. So now I'm pretty happy with this approach, and we can move on to creating a pull request. So here's the pull request that Q has submitted to me for feedback. And it's done a pretty good job of generating a brand new file with the API client, but it struggled to make changes correctly in the main web page file. So I can give feedback here directly in the pull request, just like any other pull request in Code Catalyst. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a hint as to how it should be incorporating these changes into that file. I clicked on Create Revision to prompt Q to go and create another revision of this pull request based on all my feedback. And this time Q did a much better job of figuring out how to incorporate those changes into that existing file. There's still a few tweaks that I would make. I would say the code is about 95% of the way there. So at this point, I could give Q more feedback, or I could jump into a personal development environment and continue to edit it, or just apply it to my code base and edit it from there. So thanks to Q's help, I now have my third development task completed on this new team. And now on to my final task. My team has set up a production environment ahead of the launch of this application, but we're seeing some permissions errors when we try to use the application in production environment. So my team would like me to figure out what's going on here. First, I'm going to go to the Lambda console and see what's going on. I'm going to go and test the function and see what permissions errors are coming back. When I test the function, I get this really long error log, and I'm not really sure what it means. So I'm going to go to troubleshoot with Amazon Q. Q is going to analyze the error for me and give me a human-readable description of this problem. In this case, the Lambda function doesn't have the right permissions to call Bedrock. Q can also help me resolve this issue by giving me directions for fixing the problem, including an IAM policy to attach to the function's role. So here are the step-by-step instructions that I could follow to update the role in the IAM console and attach this policy. But I'm going to jump back into my IDE to fix it in my CDK code. And in the IDE, Code Whisperer is going to help me add those missing Bedrock permissions to my Lambda function with inline code suggestions. So here's my summary function that I need to add the permissions to. And I'm going to describe what the missing permission is based on what Amazon Q told me. And you can see the suggestions that Code Whisperer is giving me in the IDE. So that was really fast to go and make that change. So that's all done. So by troubleshooting and resolving the permission bug with S3, I'm now able to mark my final task as complete. So in just a few minutes, I've completed what would have taken me weeks, 4 development tasks as a new member of this development team on a pre-launch application. And along the way, I've also gained a better understanding of my team's application and its architecture. And that was all with my AI assistant Q guiding me along the way throughout my day and throughout all of these development tasks. So now let's see my final fully working application. So I select one of a classic novel, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I provide it with chapter 1 of the novel and wait for my summarization. And the application has called the Content Summary Generator API, which uses Bedrock to generate a summary. And then also called my word cloud API to generate a word cloud image. So as we've seen in the demo, Q helped me across the entire life cycle of my development tasks. I will confess I sped up some of those demos a little bit for time's sake, but we saw Q helping me with every development task that my team assigned to me, from our backlog, from research and designing to actually writing the code for me, to testing and troubleshooting, and all the way to maintaining my code base and upgrading programming languages. Q helped me to research what S3 is as a new member of this team and new to AWS, and it helped me design how to return pre-signed URLs to my API caller. It helped me to write the code. It gave me code snippets in the chat, code snippets in the actual file I was writing, and it even gave me most of the code I needed as part of that feature development capability. So Q helped me write tests as part of that. It helped me troubleshoot a permissions error, and it helped me maintain my code base by upgrading the version of Java that I was using. So that's an incredible amount of, I've had a quite productive day with Q helping me along the way. So now that we've seen how Q changes my day as a developer, let's take a quick look at how you can get started with Q. So Q will be available through multiple plans to meet the needs of different users. And I wanted to call out 2 of these user-based plans that will be available, Q Business and Q Builder. So these 2 plans enable you to get the right set of Q features and capabilities that you need or different users need for your work. So each of these plans have a per user per month pricing. Q Business will be available for $20 per user per month, and Q Builder will be available for $25 per user per month. So today I focused on the capabilities of the Q Builder plan. With the Q Builder plan, you get access to all of the capabilities of Q Business, of the Q Business plan. You get access to CodeWhisperer Professional tier, and you get the capabilities that I showed you today. So you can chat with Q in the AWS console and in your IDE. You can troubleshoot errors, transform code, develop features, and summarize pull requests all within that Builder plan. And these capabilities are available in preview today, right now. And the feature capability will be fully available in the IDE soon and is fully available in Code Catalyst right now. So during the preview period, you can try out Q Builder capabilities for free through the AWS console or through your CodeWhisperer and Code Catalyst subscriptions. So as part of your CodeWhisperer subscription, you get access to Q capabilities in the IDE through CodeWhisperer. And as part of your Code Catalyst subscriptions, right now you get access to try out Q capabilities in Code Catalyst. So I really encourage you to try it out today during this preview period and start seeing how it can transform how you do your work and how you work as a developer with AWS. And again, Q is available where you do your work. So I encourage you to check it out in the AWS console, in your IDE, and in Code Catalyst today. So to learn more about Q and about how to get started, you can go to this page on the AWS website to learn more about each of these capabilities and about the different plans that are available. And you can check out how Q can help you build, operate, and maintain applications on AWS. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I encourage you again to go try out Q during this preview period.